Did you really come? Melissa tilted her head, raising her wine glass, as if I were a stranger crashing a wedding. I thought Mom said you weren't up for events like this anymore. The whole table burst into laughter. A light, sharp laugh, like the clinking edges of crystal glasses. I hadn't even sat down yet, but I already knew there was no chair for me. Laurel Oak was the fanciest restaurant in Magnolia Ridge, a small town that liked to act big. Soft golden lights glowed on the glassware, and pristine white tablecloths, as if the whole room was curated to erase any trace of reality. But memories aren't as easily wiped clean. I stood there for a few seconds, my hand still on my worn navy handbag. A simple dress, hair tied back neatly, no lipstick, no powder, no heels. Just me, Evelyn Hartman, former Major General of the U.S. Marine Corps back in Magnolia Ridge after 14 years, and not one person at that table remembered why I'd left in the first place. If you've ever returned to a place you once called home only to feel like an uninvited guest comment, I get it below. Maybe we have more in common than you think. Mrs. Hartman. The family table is at the back. The waitress flashed a smile as if I were the delivery guy. She wasn't wrong, just right in the most painful way. I followed her through rows of tables adorned with candles, glasses, and hollow compliments. Eyes glanced over me, never lingering. Just like how this town always glossed over anyone who no longer fit its script. I was pointed to a chair by the kitchen door where you could smell the steam from the dishwasher and hear the clatter of pots and pans. The heavy scent of olive oil lingered between layers of expensive perfume. I sat down silent, present, but invisible. "Is that Evelyn?" A shrill female voice piped up from the middle of the table. "Wow, I thought you were still, somewhere overseas." More laughter, louder this time. An uncle nodded, leaning closer to me. "Have you applied for a job at the supermarket yet?" "Gotta live now that you're done soldiering." I didn't respond. I'd learned to let words slide off me without leaving a mark, a survival skill second only to dodging bullets. I didn't mention that a week ago I'd turned down a position with a special unit at the Pentagon because I refused to politicize the lives of my soldiers. I didn't mention the scar still throbbing under my collar from the bullet that lodged in me during the Fallujah campaign. And I certainly didn't mention that I'd just become the legal guardian of Chloe, the daughter of Sergeant Elijah Brooks, who didn't make it back. People don't ask, not because they don't know, but because they don't want to. Melissa Hartman. My sister arrived late as usual, perfectly timed for the theatrical entrance she loved. Red dress, stilettos, softly waved hair, the kind our mother always called the mark of a successful Southern lady. She air-kissed the mayor and announced loudly, "Melissa Hartman, CEO of Magnolia Forward, a community initiative backed by the Langston Group." Not a word, not a glance in my direction. Our mother, Barbara Hartman, stood to speak. Silver hair in an elegant updo, a champagne-colored dress without a single crease. Her voice was steady poised. "I'm so happy to have my children and grandchildren here." Melissa, with her tireless dedication to the community. Brian, congratulations on medical school. And little Anna, a National Spelling Bee medal, so proud. Not a single word for the daughter who'd led a civilian rescue operation under fire. I raised my glass, clinking it lightly with the air so my hand wouldn't shake. A distant aunt peered at me through thick glasses. "Were you in logistics in the military handing out rations or armor?" I smiled. I'd commanded a battalion in Fallujah. I'd written death notifications. I'd chosen who would live and who would have to die. But none of that fit the Magnolia lady mold, so I just nodded as if I were someone else. Melissa approached me, the piano music drifting through the air like mist. "You showed up at Just Ascot right on time," she said softly, her eyes still fixed on the stage. "But Mom didn't want the mood today to be overshadowed. Hope you understand." I looked at her, the girl who cried when I left for boot camp, who copied my homework and blamed me when caught, who hadn't written me a single line in 14 years. Silence can be a soft kind of war, and I wasn't trained to fight family. In that moment, I saw an old photo on the table some Christmas long ago. Melissa and I, in elf costumes, red fuzzy hats, grinning ear to ear. In the photo, her hand rested on my shoulder. Back then, she hadn't let go. And then the thing I least expected came from a small voice. A little girl about 8 tugged my sleeve and asked softly, "Are you Melissa's friend? You're new. I've never seen you before." I tried to smile, but my throat tightened. I couldn't answer. Not because the question was hard, but because I no longer knew who I was in this place. When dessert was served chocolate mousse with a mint leaf garnish, I tasted nothing. Only saw Fallujah flashing by me, holding the last water bottle, passing it to Elijah as he bandaged a teammate's leg under gunfire. I remembered his eyes when I took a bullet for him. That memory was so vivid, I could almost hear the gunfire cutting through the polite laughter in the banquet hall. When the dinner ended, no one offered me a ride home. I walked back to the motel. The golden streetlight stretched my shadow across the Magnolia Ridge sidewalk, a town unchanged where I no longer belonged. I know you've probably been to a party where you realized I'm the only one not welcome. If you've felt that comment, I'm here, so I know you get it. Because this story isn't just mine. The next morning I woke to the smell of bleach and an old air conditioner. The only message was from my father, "Thanks for coming. Your mother's tired, not up for another visit." I wasn't angry, just cold, like the scar under my collar, aching, never healing. But I didn't know in that room the iron chest under the bed was about to awaken history. She's asleep. The little girl's voice was soft as a whisper of wind. But I dreamed of Dad. Aunt Evelyn, does he see me? I sat up straight in the chair by her bed, my eyes still fixed on the faint, golden glow from the nightlight. Chloe Brooks, 8 years old, brown hair, eyes as blue as her father's, rolled over, burying her face in the worn pillow next to her frayed teddy bear. I didn't answer, not because I didn't know, but because if anyone in this world deserved an answer, it had to come from Elijah. Some wounds don't show on the skin. They live in promises unkept, in final glances you dare not recall, in the sound of explosions echoing every time you close your eyes. And tonight, in this bleach-scented motel room with an ancient AC, I knew I couldn't sleep until I retraced the path that brought me here. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket, the kind with a pentagon seal stamped confidential, clearance level Delta. Inside was an offer to appoint me as a general advisor to Strategic Command. A dream job, generous pay, a big office, safe. Mornings with cappuccino instead of worrying about IEDs under the car. And I'd turned it down. If you've ever said no to a big opportunity, not because you're weak, but because you didn't want to lose the human part of yourself, comment, I get it below. Sometimes courage is knowing when to step back. Fallujah. 7 years ago. Smoke. Dust. Blood. I remember every detail as if it were yesterday. Elijah Brooks was a sergeant, a combat medic, and quick response soldier, skilled sharp and always smiling. When our unit got orders to evacuate civilians from the red sector, I knew we had no time. Every minute could be the last. We moved through shattered buildings carrying screaming children, pulling an old woman who wouldn't leave her cat. Elijah was always in the middle, never behind, never running ahead alone. He was the team's pivot. And then, the explosion. A bullet hit the wall 5 steps from us. Elijah went down, not from being shot, but from shielding a child about to be torn from its mother. When I turned back, I saw him lying there, blood soaking his lower abdomen. I crawled to him, covering him with my body. Bullets kept coming. One tore through my armor, lodging in my collarbone. But I didn't move. Not because I was brave, but because I knew if I didn't shield him, no one would stand up after that day. Elijah survived long enough for the chopper to take him, but not long enough for the operating room. 3 days later, I was the only one to sign his death certificate. I was the only one to receive a letter from his family, and I promised I wouldn't let Chloe grow up not knowing who her father was. The motel light blurred. I looked at the bed where Chloe slept peacefully, one leg over her bare hair tangled across her forehead. She snored softly. Each small sound tightened my chest. I didn't give birth to her, but I chose to keep her in a world where few choose to keep anything but themselves. Under the warped wooden dresser, I pulled out a battered army trunk, rusted at the edges, lock-dented. Inside was all that remained, a broken cornered medal, a triangularly folded flag, a stack of redacted documents, promotion denied. In a small cloth bag at the bottom, I kept a handwritten letter from Elijah's mother and Chloe's first scribbled drawing. Have you ever held on to a small keepsake because it carries an entire person who's gone? Comment, I still keep it if you know that feeling. Because sometimes the smallest things are the most important. The Pentagon wanted me back. They said I was suited for national strategy. They wanted me behind a desk in a suit, appearing on defense briefings as a model post-war female general. They didn't ask if I was raising an 8-year-old who'd just lost her father. They didn't ask if I still got 4 hours of sleep a night. They only asked if I was image and politically appropriate. And I refused. Not because I was done fighting, but because I'd chosen to fight on a different front where Elijah was gone, but Chloe remained. I remember one evening months ago when Chloe asked me in the car, "Aunt Evelyn, why do people call Dad a hero? Did he have magic?" I said no. Heroes don't have magic. Heroes stand up even when no one stands beside them. Chloe thought for a long time. Then she said, "Then you're a hero too, because you stayed." I turned away so she wouldn't see me cry. The night dragged on. The clock crawled as if time itself refused to move forward. I opened my laptop news feeds flooded with Melissa designer dress signature smile standing next to Victor Langston, the man who'd supplied illegal weapons to the very region where Elijah died. "Melissa sent me one message last year, sis. If you could share some Fallujah details for my fundraising profile, that'd be great. Just PR. I didn't reply, because Fallujah wasn't an asset for someone else to excerpt for media. I closed the trunk, locking it as if I could lock the memories inside. But I knew better. The past doesn't live in trunks. It lives in your veins, in what you do every day to not betray what you've witnessed." Chloe stirred opening sleepy eyes. "Aunt Evelyn, are you ever scared?" I hesitated, then said yes. "But I don't let fear decide who I am." She nodded, and fell back asleep. I looked out the window. Streetlights cast shadows on the cracked sidewalk. All of Magnolia Ridge was sleeping, or pretending to sleep so they didn't have to see who'd come back. I knew tomorrow I'd have to start unraveling everything. Not just for me, but for Elijah, for Chloe, and for those who'd been silent too long. I don't know what hurts more. Seeing your face erased from history, or seeing your teammate's medal pinned on someone who's never heard real gunfire. I didn't plan to visit Magnolia Forward. After last night's dinner, I just needed air and a reason to step out of the bleach-heavy motel room thick with memories. But Magnolia Ridge is a strange town. The more you try to wander aimlessly, the more it pushes you to exactly where you need to see. The name Magnolia Forward was painted white on the gray cement wall of a renovated warehouse. Front and center was a nearly 10-foot-tall poster dominating the glass entrance. Melissa stood at its heart, a navy blue power suit. Sharp lapels arms crossed with authority. On her left chest, a bronze star medal awarded for exceptional bravery in combat. I froze. If you've ever stood before something you thought was familiar, only to realize it's a blatant lie comment, I've seen it below. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't come in words, but in images crafted to evoke misplaced trust. I stepped closer to the glass, my eyes locked on the detail that chilled me. That medal, I recognized it instantly, a faulty design recalled 7 years ago. A batch miss engraved with a commander's name. Cancelled per protocol. Only someone with access to storage or trafficking medals illegally could have kept one. And now it sat on my sister's chest like a fashion accessory, as if blood and fire were just marketing material. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to ask. I knew Melissa had used military imagery as a prop. A corner of the ad below, the image read, "From family legacy to community dedication." Melissa Hartman embodies the spirit of service. Spirit of service. While the one who truly served was seated by the dishwasher at Mom's birthday dinner. I stepped back, unsure where I was going. Just knew I had to leave before the fire in my chest turned to action. I walked 2 blocks to Dad's old bookstore, where, as a kid, I'd hide behind shelves sneaking historical novels. The door still jingled when opened. That familiar sound made me think time hadn't passed. Until I saw it. On the cashier's desk was a bronze-framed photo, angled solemnly like a quietly awarded medal. I leaned closer to read. Evelyn Hartman, 2nd Lieutenant Logistics Division. Non-combat classification below the photo, a Department of Defense logo slanted rigid. And beneath it, smaller text served with distinction in support of peacekeeping operations. I stood still for a moment. Not shocked. Just too used to being distorted, but for the first time my own family had framed it. The photo was real, but cropped. I remembered the moment it was taken after Kandahar mud still on my boots' eyes, swollen from 3 sleepless nights. I'd been promoted shortly after, but the rank was cut from the frame. If you've ever seen someone twist the truth about you because it's easier to swallow comment, I'm still me. Because sometimes the hardest truth is the most valuable part of you. Dad emerged from the back carrying a box of old books. He froze when he saw me holding the frame. "You found it," he said, as if it was something he knew couldn't stay hidden forever. I looked at him. No blame. No anger. Just one question. Why he set the box down, then pulled up an old chair, sighing. "Your mother couldn't bear the thought that you'd killed people. She wanted to remember you as the girl who read books, played piano, not the one leading soldiers through battle." "And you?" I asked. "What about you?" He rubbed his forehead lightly. "I just wanted to keep the peace between you and her, between you and this town, this place. They don't understand war. They like simple stories, Evelyn. Accomplished daughters, long hair, MBAs, and no guns." I nodded as if I understood, but my heart was silent, not agreeing. I reached behind the frame. The print inside was fake, self-made, no security code, no official stamp. A civilian wouldn't notice, but I'd read hundreds of classified files. One glance was enough. I looked around the shop on the left. Melissa's college graduation photo hung high, large frame light, shining directly on it. On the right, my photo in uniform, smaller, hung lower, placed by the door like a faint reminder. I turned to Dad. "The truth isn't something to hide, Dad. It needs accountability, not editing." He said nothing, just looked up at me, eyes quiet. I pulled the print from the frame, folded it in quarters, and tucked it into my coat pocket. Dad didn't stop me. "Has someone you trusted ever chosen silence to please others instead of defending the truth about you? If so, leave a comment. I haven't vanished. Because no one has the right to erase you from the story you've lived." I left the bookstore without another word. Magnolia Ridge stayed quiet as if nothing had happened. But in me, a door had opened, and it wouldn't close again. I thought of Chloe, of Elijah, of those who died so the truth could exist, and felt more choked than ever, knowing my own family chose to cover it up. Back at the motel, I pulled out a small photo from the trunk, Elijah and me in Fallujah, behind a relief convoy. We weren't smiling, just staring straight, resolute, real. And that's why I wouldn't let them rewrite history anymore. If you're still reading this, maybe you're holding on to a memory someone wants to reshape for easier telling. Leave a comment. The truth needs a keeper. Because if we don't tell it right, others will tell it wrong. Some nights you don't choose sleep. You simply can't. Not when memories knock like they refuse to be buried another day. I sat motionless on the bed's edge, the laptop screen still glowing faintly from Melissa's hollow speech. She spoke of community revival, military tradition, in the rehearsed language of those who've never heard real gunfire. I closed my eyes and saw sand. Fallujah, 2016. I remember the smoke-choked sunset, the ashen sky, and breaths heavy with mud, gunpowder, and unspent adrenaline. Elijah Brooks, sergeant combat medic. Teammate, man of his word. Always the last to move, because he needed to ensure no one was left behind. In Operation Emberline, we got word of 42 civilians trapped between 2 combat zones. We were the closest unit. No time for reinforcements, no permission to wait. I gave the order to move in. Elijah just nodded. No questions. I remember gunfire tearing the air as we crossed a narrow alley. I remember Elijah hoisting a wounded boy onto his shoulder, grinning at me through the smoke. "Next time, can you pick a mission in Hawaii?" 3 minutes later, I heard him shout. Then blood. Then my voice, not commanding, just instinct, rushing forward, shielding him. A bullet lodged in my left collarbone. Elijah lay still. I thought he died right then. But no. He woke up on the chopper, and his first words were, "If I don't make it tell this story, tell it right, all of it." I never told it. I kept my word. Until now, when the truth is being used to build false statues. I opened the old military trunk, the one I'd locked since coming home. Dust coated its surface, proof of all I'd tried to bury. In the fabric lining, I found the golden eagle pin Elijah's gift slipped into my hand the night before the mission. I'd never dared look closely at it. just kept it like keeping a piece of him. I ran my finger along its edge. Something uneven. A tiny groove on the back like a seam. I squinted. Took a paper knife, carefully pried the blade into the groove. Click. The back popped open. Inside was a micro SD card smaller than a fingernail. No label, no note, just silence and the trust Elijah placed in me. If you've ever held something you thought was just a keepsake, only to find it holds a forgotten truth comment, I kept it right. Because sometimes one person keeping their word can rewrite history. I plugged the card into my laptop. A folder appeared, dust-line, confidential 3 audio files. No titles, no dates, no notes. I played the first, File 1. A man's voice, low-cold, cargoes listed as medical supplies. But you and I both know it's military-grade intercept ammo. A second voice, familiar enough to stop my breath. Elijah. You're running weapons through a civilian zone. Women and kids are there. You know that. It's war. There's collateral. Don't get sentimental. Footsteps walking away. Elijah's sharp, restrained breathing. I played the second file. File 2. I can't let this continue. If command finds out the whole supply chain gets audited, and you think Langston will sit quietly, you're too naive, Brooks. Langston. Victor Langston. The man funding Magnolia Forward. The man standing beside my sister in every photo. The man who got Elijah killed. The final file. Elijah's voice soft, clear alone. If I disappear. If they say I died from a mistake. Evelyn will know. Get this to her. She'll know what to do. I sat motionless. Eyes stinging. Not crying. Just unable to breathe. If you've ever promised someone you'd do the right thing, and years later got the chance to keep that promise, comment, I'm ready. Because the time to act right is never too late as long as you're still alive. I saved the files to an encrypted drive, made a backup on a secure USB, and wrote one line on the envelope's outside, for the truth. Not for glory. I was ready. Not just to tell, but to expose. Across the room, Chloe stirred in her sleep, clutching her worn teddy bear. She didn't know tonight the world had changed. She didn't know her father left evidence that could bring down a system. But one day, she would. And she deserved to. Not Melissa's version. Not sugary PR lines. The truth, painful, but real. I placed the golden eagle pin in my palm, leaving it open this time. It had done its job of keeping secrets. Now it was time to set them free. Town Hall, present day. The town hall glowed like an elite engagement party. Crimson banners a backdrop reading Magnolia Forward. Rebuilding from legacy white orchids lining the aisles, and golden lights casting soft shadows on the high vintage ceiling. From afar, no one would think this was once a place for city council meetings. It had been revamped like how Melissa revamped the truth. I walked in wearing a simple black dress, no jewelry, no makeup. The golden eagle pin lay silent in my coat pocket. From the first moment I was an outsider. The guest list was tightly checked, and I was directed to a table at the back of the hall near the exit behind a massive projector and a concrete pillar blocking half the stage. Once again, a seat not meant for applause. Sitting with me was an elderly woman fumbling with bifocals and a drowsy young man. No one recognized me. No one bothered to ask. Maybe they thought I was staff. Maybe that was the point. The lights dimmed. The MC took the stage with a cable news smooth voice. Let's give a round of applause for the founder. The soul of this initiative, Melissa Hartman. The crowd erupted like a wave. Cameras followed my sister's every step as she strode out emerald gown, clinging to her sequins, glinting under the lights like a false talisman. On her chest, still that counterfeit bronze star medal shimmering like a lie. I breathed slowly, clenching my fists under the table. I grew up in a military family. Melissa began, her voice honeyed. My sister served, but the battlefield isn't a place everyone survives. Sacrifice leaves scars not just on the skin, but in the soul. Every eye turned to the stage. Some nodded. I learned from those wounds to build instead of fight, to connect instead of divide. No one objected. No one questioned. That's silence, the safest haven for lies. If you've sat in a room full of people who forgot you helped build the foundation they're clapping for comment, I'm still here. Because some presences don't need a spotlight, just the truth. As the MC prepared to bring Melissa down for the community honors segment, something off script happened. A boy about 7 stood timidly from the front row. White shirt, red tie, slightly askew face creased with nerves. No one knew who he was. No one stopped him. And somehow he made it to the stage. The MC faltered. Melissa turned. But the boy didn't stop. He stepped to the mic, stood on tiptoes, reaching for the stand. No one helped. I recognized him. Ben, son of Sergeant Tom Wallace, killed in an IED blast in Syria. I'd served with Tom early on. I was the one who steadied his flag-draped coffin back at base. The boy spoke, voice shaky but clear. I just want to say one thing. I don't know who Ms. Melissa is, but Aunt Evelyn back there, he pointed straight at me. She visited my mom in the hospital when my dad died. She brought me the cap he used to wear. The entire hall turned to me. I stood still like stone. Ben continued, Aunt Evelyn doesn't talk much, but she helped my dad. Come home. I don't need anyone to tell me she's great. I already know. The room went silent. No applause. No cameras quick enough to catch it. No MC quick enough to intervene. Melissa stood, frozen, her smile stiff like wax. The hall turned from the lights and toward something that actually touched hearts. Ben walked back to his mother near the rear door. She looked at me, then nodded slightly. I bowed my head in return, not from pride, but knowing the truth had been spoken by the one person with no reason to lie. The ceremony went on, but no one paid attention. The next voices sounded like static background to something else rising doubt. I felt different looks from those who'd once passed over me. Some whispered. Some looked down. Melissa left the stage early. The MC rushed to the fundraising segment, but no one filled envelopes. They looked at each other. They started to rethink. That night, as I left, an older woman approached me in the parking lot. She didn't give her name, just placed her hand on mine and said, "They should have listened to you from the start. Thank you for staying so they could see." I said nothing, but as she walked away, I gripped my coat pocket where Elijah's memory card rested. His voice echoed in my head, "You know what to do." I knew, and now the town was starting to know. I'd sat for hours watching people take the stage with rehearsed Broadway acts, polished lines, bright lights, dazzling backdrops. The so-called future leaders of Magnolia were no different from a fashion show labeled as community service. Melissa remained the centerpiece. She commanded every gaze, every photo, every praise from ambitious youth and polished politicians before genuine kindness. And when she stepped to the center stage, the hall stood to applaud. Remember, I thought what builds honor and what's just a costume. She served, but the battlefield was too heavy for a woman. Let's not blame her. Let's learn from it. Melissa opened her speech like that, before listing non-existent achievements headlines crafted from the graveyard of false honor. She might forget, but I remember. I remember Fallujah. I remember Elijah Brooks. And I remember the metal box holding all the shadows she and Victor Langston tried to hide. And at that moment, the back door of the hall opened. 20 people walked in dressed civilian but unmistakable straight spines, scanning eyes, squared shoulders. Comrades. The leader wore a metal watch on his left wrist, a stripe on his shoulder from a past regiment. Colonel Jack Monroe. I stood still as he approached. He stopped before me, and then he saluted sharply. "Welcome back, Major General Hartman." The entire hall turned. Glasses clinked, wine spilled onto carpets. Melissa froze, her eyes wide, as if wishing her feet could vanish into the stage. Monroe faced the crowd, announcing, "Ladies and gentlemen, this woman led Operation Emberline in Fallujah, saving 42 civilians under direct fire. She refused promotion to protect her team's honor. They tried to forget her. We haven't." Gasps rose from the stands. Comment, "I still remember who stood for me if you too owe someone who stood behind silenced honor." Victor Langston stood. He stammered I wasn't informed about. Monroe cut him off, voice steady, and Major Hartman uncovered an illegal arms deal threatening civilian lives. One of the contract holders per recordings is Victor Langston. For the first time in an hour, Melissa wasn't the center. The new center drawn by comrades and true honor was the truth. I held Elijah's card in my hand, still warm like an unkept promise. I'm still here, Elijah. Now the mouths are open. Sometimes apologies don't come in tears or hugs. They arrive quietly wrapped in handwritten lines, yellowed with age, waiting years in dusty drawers. I'd never seen Mom cry. Barbara Hartman, the woman in turtleneck shoulders, always straight as if Magnolia Ridge were watching, didn't allow weakness. She was the town's ideal, poised, polished, and knowing who to love, who to praise, who to hide. And I, in her eyes, was always the hyphen out of line, a crack too hard to fix between tradition and truth. After the town hall event, I got a short call from Dad. Your mother wants to see you. No explanation, no promises. I stepped into the old house, still smelling of oak and faint baked bread. Everything was strangely quiet. Mom sat in her familiar armchair by the window hands on an old photo album. Afternoon light touched her hair grayer than I remembered. Mom, I called softly. She didn't look up, just said quietly, Do you have a moment? She pointed to a wooden cabinet near the fireplace. Bottom drawer. There's an old wooden box. Get it for me. I did. The box was small, dusty. When I opened it, I saw a stack of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. On top was a yellowed envelope, clearly marked to Evelyn, Fallujah, 2011. I froze. Can I read it? She asked. Her voice trembled for the first time I heard her lose control. I nodded and read. My dearest daughter, I wrote this letter the night you called from Fallujah, when your voice still carried sand and fire. I wanted to say so much, but my throat kept choking. So I wrote. I was scared you wouldn't come back, but more scared that if you read this, you'd see me weak, unable to hold you here. I didn't know how to be proud, without fear to love you, without trying to reshape you. You were always stronger than I imagined. Not because you wore a uniform, but because you chose a path that forced me in this town to face the truth. It took me too many years to understand that. I'm sorry for my silence. And if you come back one day, I hope you know not a single moment passed when I stopped watching you even from so far. Love in my way, Barbara. When I looked up, my eyes stung. I didn't cry in war. I didn't cry burying Elijah. But now? My heart softened like a wound finally done bleeding. Why didn't you send it? Mom looked out the window. I thought, if you read it in the battlefield, you wouldn't come back. You'd believe you didn't need anyone. I was wrong. I sat beside her, gently placing my hand on hers. For the first time in years, there was no battle line between us. If you've ever received an apology, not in words, but in a look, a gesture, or an unsent letter comment, I understand that. Because sometimes forgiveness begins not with them, but with your own heart opening. We sat together for a long time. No one spoke, but one thing was clear: I no longer had to fight to prove myself to her. As I stood to leave, Mom handed me a small object, a photo I'd never seen. Me in uniform bandaging a girl in Iraq. The photo clearly wasn't taken by family. I looked at her puzzled. A Red Cross doctor sent it to me. She said, You saved that child when other units had pulled back. I kept it, but didn't know if I should let you know. I nodded, lightly. Now you know. I left the house, my heart a fraction lighter. Not because everything was healed, but because I knew I wasn't alone in my past anymore. But on the way back, my phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. A link. No subject. No explanation. I opened it, and what I saw froze my heart. In war, I knew exactly where the enemy's bullets were aimed. But here, among anonymous comments and edited videos, I can't see them clearly anymore, just an invisible hunt. And I'm the prey. I'd never been scared when gunfire rang in my ears. But tonight, before my laptop screen, my chest felt crushed like someone piled stones on my lungs. The video was 3 minutes long. It opened with me shouting into a radio, my voice spliced with orders I never gave. Pull back. Leave them. Then came real footage. I knew every frame, but re-edited Fallujah, burning comrades, falling. Elijah Brooks carried from rubble. all layered like a silent indictment. Bold white text on the screen, "True hero," or "deserter?" I didn't know how far the video had spread, but when I checked my inbox, over 300 emails waited. More than half were insults. Some called me a coward in medals. Others demanded my decorations be revoked. On a veterans forum, a post titled, "She's Not One of Us," had thousands of shares. And then I saw it. An excerpt from an old blog, by Melissa. Surviving war isn't always glory. Sometimes the survivor just ran faster. The post from when I was still overseas now resurfaced as confirmation from my own kin. I clenched my fists, teeth grinding, until my jaw felt like it might crack. But the anger lasted only minutes. Then came the eerie calm of those who've known falling. Morning came with a knock at the door. It was Melissa. She looked worse than ever, dark circles, smudged lipstick, clutching her bag like holding on to something about to collapse. "Evelyn, I need help," she whispered. "They're turning on me." I didn't answer, just opened the door enough for her to step in. Melissa set a stack of papers on the table. I recognized them instantly, copies of falsified internal records, where I was just a logistics officer, no achievements, no valor. "I sent these to Langston." She didn't look up. "I thought it was media support, just to clear me from scandal. They said you were investigated. I didn't verify. I just signed. Didn't verify I asked, or didn't want to Melissa choked. They threatened to pull funding. Magnolia Forward would collapse. I panicked. I thought, if you took the hit, it'd blow over. And now they cut me off. Langston's gone silent. Sponsors vanished. I think I was just a pawn. And they want to destroy you completely." I sat flipping through the papers. Red ink notes in the margins, edits, additions, deliberate distortions. Precise, systematic. My phone buzzed. Jack Monroe. "They're trying to reopen your military file. There's a request to review your promotions from an IP tied to Langston's corporation." I sighed. "And if they have enough power to pull the government into this, they don't need to win legally. They just need to ruin your name in the media." Then clean paper turns to guilt. I hung up, turning to Melissa. She sat trembling like a child caught stealing. "I can make it right." She looked up. "How step into the light? All of it. No excuses. No tears. If I do that, I lose everything. And I lost Elijah. 14 years of my life. Nearly myself. You think you're the only one paying a price? If you've been hurt by those you trusted but still stood still, chose truth comment, I'm still here. Your presence, even quiet, is a victory." Melissa didn't answer, but I knew she understood. And understanding was enough to start if she dared. That night, I printed 2 copies of the unedited Fallujah investigation. I sent all of Elijah's recordings to Nolan Graves, the only journalist still bold enough to publish unbought. I added one line, "Let the dead have the final word." And I knew the real battle hadn't begun. On my laptop, the smear video hit 3.4 million views. But beside it, a new link appeared. The truth about Major General Evelyn Hartman. The untold story. I hit share. This time, I wasn't speaking for others. I spoke for myself. There are truths that don't need permission to exist. They just need one person brave enough to stand and say, "I'm still here." I stepped from the wings. No uniform, no medals, no symbols tied to my soldier's life. Just a woman in a simple black suit, standing before a sea of people, and the glare of lenses ready to dissect everything. Nothing shielded me but the truth. The vast conference center seemed to shrink as I approached the podium. My heart didn't race, not because I wasn't afraid, but because this time I fought on my own terms. "Hello," I began, voice clear, steady. "I'm Evelyn Hartman. Once they called me Major General, but today I stand here not for a rank, but for a promise." I looked up straight into the front row, where reporters jostled cameras, panning relentlessly. A promise to someone who didn't live to tell his own story. I clicked the remote. The giant screen behind me lit up. Images from Fallujah appeared unedited, undramatized. Photos I took myself after counterattacks blackened streets, a child carried through gunfire. Elijah Brooks still alive, lips tight, holding the squad's spirit together. Then I played the recording. Elijah's voice rang out clear, resolute, pure soldier. You don't get it. This is a no-go zone full of civilians. If you move weapons there, you're turning innocents into targets. I won't let that happen. I turned to the audience. Many held their breath. Some covered their mouths. Old soldiers placed hands on their chests, eyes wet. I used to think justice came from courts, from verdicts, I continued. But really, justice begins when we stop being silent. Another recording played Elijah in his final voice. If I don't make it back, let Evelyn speak. She knows what to do. I paused, took a deep breath. I refused promotion not because I feared responsibility. I refused because they wanted to use Elijah's name to legitimize an arms deal, a baptism by medals. And I wouldn't let that happen. A man in uniform stepped onto the stage. Military lawyer, Colonel Ronald Graves. After receiving the original documents and recordings, he said federal agencies have verified their authenticity. We confirm Major General Evelyn Hartman was never investigated, never abandoned her post, never breached military discipline. The room fell silent. Then a steady clap rose, not loud, but even like the march of boots in step. If you've been forced to stay silent but held on to the truth, comment I don't need permission to exist. Your courage strengthens those waiting to be believed. As I left the podium, I saw Mom Barbara standing among the back row. She said nothing, just placed a hand on her heart. Dad beside her eyes read. Melissa stood farther off, no longer trying to stand out, just nodding quietly. I didn't need applause. I needed those who turned away. To see light doesn't always shine from the brightest places. That night, my speech video spread widely. Elijah was gone, but his story lived. And I knew that mattered more than any medal I'd ever worn. Sometimes change isn't loud. It starts with a handshake, a fearless word, a girl placing flowers on a father's grave never fully honored. I returned to Magnolia Ridge on a gray morning, clouds low over mossy rooftops and a still lake. The town looked no different from when I first came back, but what changed was how they saw me. A girl at the coffee shop handed me a cappuccino, no charge. She only said thanks for speaking for those who can't. An older man at the gas station nodded, whispering Brooks was my friend. I didn't need a nameplate, didn't need a uniform, just needed them to remember who Elijah Brooks was. That noon the news broke, Victor Langston arrested. Images of him, hands cuffed behind his back, stepping from his ivory white mansion, hit the front page of nearly every major outlet. Charges arms trafficking, interfering with military and media operations, threatening federal witnesses. Notably, one key witness me. I'd been placed in a federal whistleblower protection program. My name, Evelyn Hartman, now a reminder that truth with evidence and resolve outlasts money and media. Melissa called that afternoon. Her voice still hoarse, cautious. All funding's pulled. They froze every investment. I have to shut down the office. A pause. I know I was wrong, Evelyn. But if you hadn't stepped into the light, I think people would still believe what I built. I didn't comfort, didn't punish. The truth doesn't forgive anyone, but it can save them if they're brave enough to face it. The next day I took Chloe to the cemetery, a peaceful place at least for those who refused to live quietly so others could. She wore a floral dress holding a single wild daisy. She didn't ask much, just stood quietly beside me. This is my dad, right? I nodded. Elijah Brooks, Sergeant. The man who taught me that doing right doesn't need an audience. Chloe looked up, eyes clear as the sky after a storm. You spoke for him. I don't need anyone to say he's a hero. I already know. I turned away, hiding tears. In every battle I'd fought, nothing broke me more than honest words from a child. If you've lost someone to society's silence or held truth because no one would listen, share a line in the comments. I remember them. I still speak for them. You're not alone. That evening I passed Dad's old bookstore. The light inside still glowed. Dad was wiping the glass case. Seeing me, he stepped out holding something small wrapped in brown paper. This was in the storage closet. I think you should have it. I unwrapped it, an old photo Elijah and me at boot camp uniforms caked in mud, but eyes bright like kids who'd just found they could change the world. On the back, Elijah's familiar scrawl. If I'm not here, live right for both of us. Langston was arrested. Melissa lost her facade. But I found something I thought I'd lost why I joined the Marines in the first place. Not for glory, but for others. The next morning I started organizing files. Not to sue, not to retaliate, but to plan what would fill the void Langston left. A community center for veterans, for families like Chloe, for those forgotten in the peace they helped preserve. The name Elijah had already chosen it with his actions and sacrifice. There are fires that don't blaze, only burn quietly lifelong in hearts to guide those walking in darkness. I didn't think I'd feel peace at a public ceremony. I was used to standing behind war maps, battlefield dust, not red ribbons stretched between flagpoles. But this morning I stood there with Chloe hand in hand, before hundreds of Magnolia Ridge residents, veterans, students, even faces I thought would never look at me with respect again. Under the blue sky, sunlight touched the engraved bronze plaque at the entrance, founded by Major General Evelyn Hartman, to keep light for those still finding their way. Not a claim of power, a commitment. A fire kept not to illuminate me, but to spark hope in others. The opening ceremony was simple, no fanfare, no vain praise. Just sincere thanks, tight hugs, and an air like the town was breathing easier. I stepped up with Chloe to cut the ribbon. As we pulled the smooth band, her small hand gripped mine tightly. She looked up, whispering, "My dad would be proud." I nodded slightly. In my heart, Elijah Brooks still stood here as he always had, holding the line, keeping promises and keeping truth no one dared tell. I looked around. In the crowd, I saw a familiar face, not on stage, not in designer clothes, not holding a mic. Melissa. She wore a white shirt, black pants, plain enough to blend with the most ordinary. But something in her eyes had changed. She didn't look away, didn't flash a rehearsed smile. She looked at me straight and clear, then nodded slightly. For the first time, my sister stood, not for the spotlight, but for someone else. I didn't need her apology. Actions weigh more than words, and sometimes forgiveness begins not with a conversation, but with a silent acknowledgement. As guests filed in to tour the center, Chloe and I paused by a glass case in the main hall. Inside, set against green velvet, was the golden eagle pin, Elijah's pin. Below it, a small bronze inscription, testament to survival, and a promise not to forget. Beside it, the old photo-me armor caked in Fallujah's rubble, pulling a boy from debris. My eyes in that photo, not victorious, but those of someone unsure if they'd make it back. And that's why I built this place. Not to boast I survived, but so others wouldn't have to survive alone. A reporter approached Major General Hartman after everything. "What satisfies you most?" I looked out at the wide courtyard where veterans chatted with students, where the American flag flew, not for victory, but for the silent sacrifices behind it. I answered, "Not recognition, not a medal. What satisfies me is knowing when I leave this place will stay. To remind people doing right doesn't need permission. If you've been overlooked for speaking truth, comment, I still hold the fire. Your flame may be hope for others." I stepped out to the red brick courtyard, sitting on a stone bench by the memorial garden. Chloe played with other kids, laughing, her feet racing across the yard as if the world had never known darkness. Melissa approached, sitting beside me. No apologies, just a long, honest breath. "Thanks for not abandoning me." I looked at her. "You pulled yourself from those ashes. That's as vital as any valor." Dusk fell over Magnolia Ridge. The last rays hit the bronze plaque, making Elijah Brooks' name gleam as if he still stood among us. I stood leading Chloe toward the gate. Another bronze plaque had just been installed, glowing under the sunset, founded by Major General Evelyn Hartman, not to shine, but to keep the flame for those still finding their way. I smiled. Not from pride, not from honor, but because for the first time in years, everything was in its place. Names right, people right, and the light never to go out. Though I left the battlefield years ago, there was one war I never foresaw, the fight to be heard believed and allowed to exist as my true self. This story isn't just mine, Major General Evelyn Hartman's. It's about everyone who's been silenced, distorted, left behind because they didn't fit an easy mold. I share this journey to remind you, honor doesn't come from medals or cheers, but from standing for what's right, even when no one claps. Sometimes one person keeping the fire is enough, and that fire will light the way for others to find themselves. If this story touched you, leave a comment, even just "I hear you." Follow the channel to join me in this journey of sharing truths that need to shine, because some things once told will never fade. Thank you for staying until the end.